A man pauses in the street, confused by the strange white stones falling from the sky. At first, they look harmless, almost delicate, like flakes of snow drifting through the warm air of late summer. But when one strikes the tiled roof above him, it cracks loudly against the clay. Another hits the ground, just missing another man with a heavy thud. Within minutes, the stones are falling faster, louder, and harder. The people of Pompeii look upward in disbelief as the sky darkens and the sunlight fades behind an immense tower of ash, rising above Mount Vesuvius. No one in the city yet understands that they are witnessing the beginning of one of the most catastrophic natural disasters in the ancient world. For centuries, Pompeii had thrived along the fertile coastline of southern Italy. Situated near the Bay of Naples, the city occupied a strategic and prosperous position within the Roman Empire. Ships arrived regularly at nearby ports carrying goods from across the Mediterranean. Traders brought olive oil from Greece, wine from Spain, spices from the east, and fine pottery from distant provinces. Pompeii itself exported agricultural products that flourished in the region's rich volcanic soil. Vineyards stretched across the countryside, producing wine that was prized throughout Italy. Orchards yielded figs, olives, and almonds. Farmers in the surrounding countryside enjoyed harvests that were both plentiful and reliable. To the people who lived there, Mount Vesuvius was simply part of the landscape. Rising nearly 300 meters above the surrounding plain, the mountain appeared peaceful and green. Forests covered its slopes, and vineyards climbed part-way toward the summit. Few suspected that the mountain was anything more than an unusually tall hill. In fact, by the 1st century AD, most residents had no memory of the mountain ever erupting. The last major eruption had occurred many centuries earlier, long before written records in the region. Over generations, the memory of Vesuvius as a volcano had quietly faded from local knowledge. Life in Pompeii reflected the wealth, luxury, and culture of Roman civilization. The city's streets were paved with large stone blocks worn smooth by carts and footsteps. Public fountains supplied fresh water brought in by aqueducts to public areas and bathhouses. Citizens gathered daily in the bustling forum, the heart of the city's commercial and political life. Here merchants displayed their goods beneath shaded porticos, while politicians delivered speeches and magistrates conducted official business. Entertainment also played a central role in daily life. Pompeii possessed a large amphitheater capable of holding thousands of spectators. Crowds gathered there to watch gladiatorial games, where trained fighters battled one another or faced wild animals. Despite its prosperity, the region surrounding Pompeii had long been prone to earthquakes. Most were mild tremors that rattled buildings but caused little damage. Yet in the year AD 62, a powerful earthquake struck the area with devastating force. Temples collapsed, walls cracked, and many buildings were severely damaged. The disaster left much of the city in ruins. The citizens of Pompeii responded as Romans often did, with determination to rebuild. Over the following years, workers repaired streets, reconstructed homes, and restored temples. By AD 79, Pompeii had largely recovered from the earthquake, although some buildings still showed signs of ongoing repairs. During those years, however, strange signs began to appear around Mount Vesuvius. Small earthquakes continued to shake the region from time to time. Wells occasionally ran dry. Some residents noticed that animals behaved oddly, becoming restless before certain tremors. Most people dismissed these signs as ordinary disturbances. Earthquakes were common in southern Italy, and the mountain had never shown any sign of violent activity in living memory. Life continued as usual. Then came the late summer of AD 79. The day began like many others. The weather was warm and clear. Fishermen prepared their nets along the coast, while merchants opened their shops in the city streets. Children ran errands for their parents. Bakers lit their ovens in the early morning, filling the air with the comforting smell of fresh bread. Sometime shortly after midday, the earth trembled once more. At first the tremor seemed unremarkable, no stronger than others experienced over the previous years. But moments later, a thunderous explosion echoed from the direction of Mount Vesuvius. A colossal column of ash and smoke was rising from the summit of the mountain, climbing higher and higher into the sky. Witnesses later described the shape of the cloud as resembling a gigantic pine tree, with a tall trunk of ash surging upward before spreading outward into massive branches of smoke. The eruption had begun. Deep within the mountain, immense pressure had built up over centuries as molten rock accumulated beneath the surface. When that pressure finally broke through the volcanic plug sealing the crater, the result was a catastrophic explosion. Magma was blasted violently into the air, shattering into fragments of rock and ash. Within minutes, fine ash began drifting toward Pompeii. Soon it was joined by small pieces of pumice, lightweight volcanic stones formed when gas bubbles expand rapidly inside molten rock. At first, the falling pumice seemed little more than an inconvenience. Curious residents stepped outside to watch the strange, dark spectacle unfolding above the city. But the stones kept falling, and they grew larger. Within an hour, the streets of Pompeii were filling with pumice. The sound of rocks striking rooftops echoed across the city like an endless hailstorm. Citizens hurried to gather their belongings, while others debated whether to stay or flee. Many decided to leave immediately. They loaded carts with possessions and headed toward the city gates. Others chose to remain indoors, believing the eruption might soon subside. By evening, however, the city lay beneath a growing blanket of volcanic rubble. Streets became difficult to navigate as ash and pumice piled knee-deep in places from huge ash clouds. Lamps were lit as darkness fell earlier than usual. Thunder rumbled inside the ash cloud above, illuminated by flashes of lightning generated by the immense electrical charge within the volcanic plume. Some inhabitants escaped, but many, however, remained trapped inside their homes as the debris continued to fall. Then, shortly after dawn the following morning, the character of the eruption changed dramatically. The massive column of ash rising above the volcano began to collapse under its own weight. Instead of rising high into the sky, enormous clouds of superheated gas and volcanic material surged outward from the crater and raced down the slopes of the mountain as a pyroclastic flow. A pyroclastic flow is a fast-moving avalanche of scorching gas, ash, and fragmented rock capable of traveling at speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour. Temperatures inside these flows can reach several hundred degrees Celsius, hot enough to kill instantly. The first surges devastated the towns closest to the volcano. Soon afterward, one of these deadly clouds reached Pompeii. It swept across the city with overwhelming force, filling streets and buildings with searing ash and toxic gases. Those who had survived the long night now faced a danger far greater than falling stones. The heat alone was enough to kill within seconds. Some residents attempted to shelter inside their homes. Others tried to flee toward the countryside. Many collapsed where they stood as the superheated gases engulfed them beneath meters of sediment. Within a short time, Pompeii disappeared entirely from view, entombed beneath a thick blanket of ash, pumice, and hardened volcanic material. Across the Bay of Naples, the Roman writer Pliny the Younger observed the eruption from a safe distance. In letters written years later, he described the terrifying darkness that spread across the region as ash clouds blocked the sun. Pliny's account remains one of the most important historical descriptions of a volcanic eruption. In fact, modern scientists refer to eruptions of this type as Plinian, named after his detailed observations. Thousands perished during the disaster. Entire families were wiped out as the city was buried. In the immediate aftermath, Emperor Titus appointed officials to manage the disaster, but the city was largely abandoned. Some survivors and thieves returned to dig through the layers of ash and pumice to recover treasures, and some people returned to live in the upper floors of partially destroyed homes. However, by the 5th century AD, the area was completely abandoned. The layers of ash and pumice sealed the city almost perfectly, protecting buildings, objects, and even the shapes of victims from the effects of time. Over the centuries that followed, the exact location of Pompeii gradually faded from memory. Fields and vineyards grew over the buried ruins. Farmers worked the soil without realizing that an ancient city lay hidden beneath their feet. Nearly 1,700 years passed before the world rediscovered Pompeii. In the 18th century, excavations began after workers digging a well-encountered buried walls and artifacts. As archaeologists cleared away the hardened ash, they uncovered an astonishing sight. Entire streets, houses, and public buildings preserved exactly as they had been on the day of the eruption. Even more haunting were the hollow spaces discovered in the ash layers. These cavities had once been occupied by human bodies that decomposed over time, leaving empty molds within the hardened volcanic deposits. Some appear curled on the ground, shielding their faces from the ash. Others seem to be reaching for loved ones. These silent forms capture a moment of human tragedy frozen in time. Today, Pompeii stands as one of the most extraordinary archaeological sites in the world. Visitors walk along the same streets, once used by Roman citizens nearly 2,000 years ago. Frescoes still decorate the walls of ancient homes. Bakeries still contain the ovens where bread was once baked on the day the eruption began. Above the ruins, Mount Vesuvius still looms over the Bay of Naples. It remains an active volcano, and millions of people now live in the surrounding region. Scientists monitor the mountain closely, studying its behavior in hopes of predicting future eruptions. The catastrophe that destroyed Pompeii serves as a powerful reminder of the immense forces that shape our planet. In a single day, a thriving Roman city was erased from the map, its people and buildings buried beneath ash and stone. Thankfully, Vesuvius is largely resting now, but most strikingly, it is considered a dangerous ticking time bomb that inevitably will erupt again.